The Amulet of Kings was an ancient, powerful and symbolic artifact used by the emperors of Tamriel to not only signal their divine right, but to ensure the divide between Oblivion and the mortal plane was maintained. However, the Amulet of Kings is not what it might initially seem. Far from simply being a crown jewel gifted by Akatosh to humanity, the history behind the amulet is much more complicated. There are ultimately different stories about how the amulet was initially made. Although players of the Elder Scrolls series will be familiar with the amulet as an artifact pertaining to the emperors of Tamriel, the gem that is at the heart of the amulet is far older than the First Cyrodiilic Empire. Chamel Adabal is the original Aeoliad name for this jewel, and far from the jewel being an artifact solely of Akatosh, the diamond was, or might have been, made when a drop of blood fell from the heart of Lorcan into an Aeoliad well. To put this into context, Lorcan was the being responsible for making Nirn, Nirn being the Elder Scrolls equivalent of Earth. Depending on which legend you consult and whether you ask a man or a mer, Lorcan was either selfless in his creation of the world or a malevolent trickster. Either way, he convinced an ensemble of other Et'Ada, who were basically primordial gods, to invest their power into creating the world. However, Akatosh and some of the other gods felt betrayed by Lorcan because they didn't know that Nirn would cost them so much of their power. So Akatosh and some others ripped Lorcan to pieces and shot his heart across the continent. So this means that at its heart, the Chim El Adabal, or Amulet of Kings, originates from Lorcan more than anything else. Other stories assert that actually it was Akatosh's blood, not Lorcan's, that made the amulet, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that it was Lorcan's blood that formed the lifeblood of this gem. Despite the amulet being of Lorcan, as we are assuming here, Akatosh forged his own covenant with Alessia, who was the human leader that overthrew the oppressive Aeoliad Empire. The Amulet of Kings thus became a symbol of legitimacy and a promise from Akatosh to protect the continent from oblivion. However, it seems that it was only many years later when the Amulet of Kings was lost and then found again by King Hrol, who passed the amulet to his son Riemann, when the famous Dragonfire ritual came into the picture.
The coronation of each new emperor is sealed when he uses the Amulet of Kings to light the dragonfires in the Temple of the One.
If you don't know, the dragonfires used to be lit at the start of a new emperor's reign, using the Amulet of Kings in order to, in Uriel Septim's words, seal shut the jaws of oblivion. In other words, the ritual was essential to ensuring that a Daedric invasion could not take place. It is this state of affairs that created the attitudes that most people have, and had, towards the Amulet of Kings, that it was an artifact born from Akatosh's selflessness. The problem I have with this entire narrative is that Akatosh seems to be overly taking credit for the effects of the Amulet of Kings. The common narrative in the game is that the Aedra are wholly good, the Daedra bad. I'm not so much doubting that the Daedra are bad here, but I think it's a fallacy to assume that the Aedra, such as Akatosh, are omnibenevolent beings who have the mortals' best interests at heart. I'll touch on this more later, but for the moment let's focus on the amulet itself. As I've said, its central use is that it's used to curb the influence of oblivion in the mortal plane, and this effect was made permanent when Martin Septim sacrificed himself to banish Mehrunes Dagon.
The amulet is shattered. Dagon is defeated. With the dragon's blood and the Amulet of Kings, we have sealed the gates of oblivion forever. The last of the Septims passes now into history. I go gladly, for I know my sacrifice is not in vain. I take my place with my father and my father's fathers. The Third Age has ended, and a new age dawns. When the next Elder Scroll is written, you shall be its scribe. The shape of the future, the fate of the Empire. These things now belong to you.
But rather than Akatosh being the one to thank here, surely it's Lorkhan, the being demonized and hated by the Aedra. Lorkhan is at the heart of the mortal plane. He was, and is, its lifeblood. He is the one who made a plane that is separate to that of Oblivion in the first place. Although Akatosh might have facilitated the Amulet of Kings' use as a barrier against the likes of Mehrunes Dagon, in actuality, rather than it being Akatosh selflessly sacrificing himself wholly to defeat the forces of Oblivion, it's more that he simply superimposed his own influence onto the artifact used by Martin Septim to defeat Dagon, even though the artifact was powerful due to Lorkhan's blood and not Akatosh's. You might have a problem with my line of thinking here because of course Lorkhan didn't willingly choose to become a part of the amulet, and it's not as if Lorkhan himself stood up for the mortal plane. It's more that his blood was appropriated by the selfless Martin Septim, helped along by Akatosh. But I'm not arguing that Lorkhan is some sort of Jesus figure. I'm more arguing that Akatosh might be a bit more self-centered and duplicitous than he might otherwise seem.
How is it that the Daedra forthrightly proclaim themselves to man, while the gods cower behind statues and the faithless words of traitor priests?
Taking complete credit for an artifact that owes its power not to him, but to the Aedra, who had the initiative and the balls to make the mortal world in the first place. To further this point, let's look at the whole situation surrounding Alessia. Legend has it that it was Akatosh who took pity on the humans enslaved by the malevolent Daedra worshipping Aeolid Empire, empowering Alessia to lead a rebellion against the elves. But Akatosh might not have been acting out of pity here. It's more likely that he was motivated by the desire to replace the Aeolid civilization, one that worships the Daedra, with a human one that worships Akatosh as its central god. Perhaps Akatosh saw an opportunity. By urging Alessia to fight the Aeolids, and by using an artifact imbued with Lorkhan's blood, but superimposing his own influence on it, Akatosh was able to secure himself as the future empire's central deity. But even if this is the case, it's indisputable that the Aelid's enslavement of the humans was atrocious. But this morally grey situation is simply an example of how great the Elder Scrolls lore is, because it refuses to be black and white. Akatosh did a good thing, helping humanity, and that's undeniable. I mean, in the case of the Oblivion Crisis specifically, Martin Septim fought Dagon in the form of Akatosh, and that's how he banished the Daedric Prince. So there's something of a paradox, because Akatosh seems to be acting morally due to the consequences of his interventions, but he's perhaps not wholly motivated out of selflessness, and instead motivated out of opportunistic selfishness. Another interesting point to delve into is that the sense that the amulet was not wholly under Akatosh's influence and was instead somewhat an independent artifact is furthered because it seems that non-Dragonborns, in other words those not ordained by Akatosh, could wear the amulet. Now, I'm aware that there are tons of theories about how Mankar Camoran is Dragonborn, but there are also theories that suggest he is a descendant of Aeolid nobility. This is relevant because Mankar Camoran wears the Amulet of Kings in the 4th Elder Scrolls game, seemingly breaking the rule that suggests that only those who share in Akatosh's blood can wear the amulet. If Mankar Camoran is part Aeolid, and that is a big if, then this would only further point to how the Amulet of Kings is Aeolid in its origin and thus somewhat independent of Akatosh's jurisdiction. I know that this video has been one-sided. I've assumed that Akatosh is egotistical, and I've assumed that the Amulet of Kings was made with Lorkhan's blood. Both of these assumptions might be wrong, and if they are, then this video is pretty meaningless. But for me, the point of investigating this avenue is to challenge accepted narratives, such as the assumption that the Aedra are good, and to highlight how morally ambiguous, and thus pretty cool, Elder Scrolls lore is. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more Elder Scrolls lore, then feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons, they really do help me out. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.